Hi, everyone. We are going to get started in just a minute here. If you are having any issues with your audio or accessing the slides, feel free to reference the info in front of you, and we'll get started in just a minute. Okay, welcome to the informational webinar for the Analyzing Relationships Between Disability, Rehabilitation, and Work, also known as ARDRAW, Small Grant Program. Today we're going to give you some background about the project, we're going to tell you a little bit more about the application process, and then we're going to talk more about the details of the program once you've been accepted. On the line today we have our Federal Project Officer, Laura King. Laura?
Hello, good afternoon. I would like to welcome you all to learn more about this grant program, and I hope to see some applications from many of you soon.
Thank you, Laura. We also have Kristen Lupfer, who is the Project Director for ARDRAW at Policy Research Associates.
Greetings, everyone. Yeah, just want to thank you for joining us today and hope to see your applications.
Thanks, Kristen. My name is Erica Smitka, and I'm the Program Coordinator for ARDRAW at Policy Research. Today, if we take a quick look at the agenda here, we're going to go over an overview of the program and talk about the application process. We'll hear from a current ARDRAW program participant, Katie Savin. And then Laura will go over an overview of the SSA program areas before we break for questions. So ARDRAW is a program that's sponsored by the Social Security Administration, but the program is actually coordinated by Policy Research Incorporated, which is a small nonprofit run out of Del Mar, New York. You can see the link to our website right there. The program is a one-year grant, which is awarded to graduate-level students to conduct supervised independent research. But it's actually a successor to the Disability Determination Process, or DDP, a previous small grant program which came before ARDRAW. And DDP was focused more on funding research related to improving the determination process for SSI and SSDI. You can find out more about DDP, and then you can also look at some past completed projects by clicking on that link there. But the goals of ARDRAW are really to provide a new analysis of work, rehabilitation, and disability issues, while also helping students and giving students the opportunity to have experience in conducting funded independent research projects, and then to promote continued research in this area of disability and work. ARDRAW started in 2016, and so this new round of applications will be our fourth ARDRAW cohort. So as I said, the program focuses on analyzing work, rehabilitation, and disability, with a focus on a lot of SSA's employment and disability programs. Some of the suggested topic areas include those that you can obviously see on the slide: characteristics of benefits, workplace accommodations, the impact of policy changes on an individual's ability to work, as well as vocational and other services used by beneficiaries. But some additional suggested topics include looking at other factors that might prevent someone from returning to work, such as transportation or maybe financial stability, as well as how has technology changed the workplace and the way in which we act in a work environment. You can find a much longer list of these topics on our website. So the program awards it's a one-year program, and it is for graduate students. You're awarded a research stipend within that year of $10,000 to do that supervised independent research. In addition to that stipend of $10,000 and the work that you'll be putting into your research, students who are accepted into the program are also given access to a number of different professional development opportunities. So some of these include writing and research resources, the opportunity to attend a professional conference related to their topic area. You'll actually hear a little bit more about that from Katie in a bit. And you can also have the opportunity to work with SSA experts regarding your research, and then lastly have the opportunity to present your research and those findings virtually through a webinar such as this. So that's a little bit of a background about ARDRAW, but now if we move towards talking about the specifics of the program and then the application process. In order to be eligible to apply, you have to be a full-time or a part-time grad student in a program, an accredited program at the time of the award, which would be fall of 2020. You should have a current academic emphasis on a lot of the topics that SSA is interested in, such as employment, rehabilitation, disability, etc. You must also be a U.S. citizen or a non-citizen national. And you'll have to find a university mentor or faculty member who is really committed to assisting you in this research and as you go through this process. And then lastly, you are unfortunately not eligible if you are an employee of SSA or if you're receiving funds from other federal sources. The expectations for students in the program are to complete the application packet, which is to be submitted online by the 28th of February. After that, students and their faculty mentors will participate in quarterly calls to talk about the progress of the research and their papers. And then students must also submit some deliverables as you go in a timely manner. You can see up there the deadlines for those deliverables. Once you're accepted, you'll do a work plan, which is due in June. You'll check in and do written quarterly reports before those quarterly calls. And then lastly, you'll have that final, kind of the culmination of all of your research will be that final 15-page research project, which is due in May of 2021. So to go over the application process, you'll have to complete an application packet, which can be found on the ARDRAW website through the link that was previously in the presentation here. And that packet would include an abstract and a research proposal, which can be around 5 pages, proof that you have access to data or will have access to data, approval from your IRB, as well as a kind of guided time frame or timeline, your resume or your CV, and then 2 letters of recommendation. So all of those things, that full application packet is due on the 28th of February, and you'll be notified of the award by May 1st. Once you submit your application, it will go through a 3-step process, a 3-step review criteria process. And the request for applications on the ARDRAW website really goes into a detailed description of this selection criteria process if you care to dig into it. But a brief overview is that the first step really looks to see if you have everything completed in the application packet. We also want to make sure that the topic of research that you proposed is relevant to the research objectives for ARDRAW and for SSA. And then the second level is that your application will be reviewed by myself, the project coordinator, and I might give you some feedback on suggested improvements, things that you might want to add or extrapolate on before your proposal gets to the final official review, which is that 3rd level. And the 3rd level is that your proposal will be reviewed by a panel of researchers as well as SSA. Once you've been selected, first you'll celebrate, and then you will have a month to submit a detailed work plan that would be due June 1st. Once you submit your work plan and that work plan is approved, you receive the first payment of that $10,000. The first payment is a $5,000 payment. And then that following month, you'll have your first quarterly call and check-in. it will be you, your mentor, the staff here at PRI, as well as the staff at SSA. And as it says, these calls will continue quarterly throughout the year of your program. Lastly, after you successfully submit your paper and your project, you'll receive that final second installment of $5,000. Questions that are asked most frequently, is there, referring to that $10,000 stipend, is there a budget or is there reporting required? There absolutely, well, there isn't. You don't have to do a budget, and reporting isn't required. However, you might hear from some of our students that it might be helpful to kind of do your own budget and make sure you're managing that on the side. As you can see, that last question, can I pay participants with your stipend funds? And you definitely can. And it's a great way to incentivize people to participate in your study. If we hop back up, can my university accept the stipend payment directly and apply it to my account? We are very flexible and can definitely work with universities in order to do just that. And then lastly, if you are doing a group project, just one person will be responsible and will receive that stipend. So to go back over the timeline here, the application is due the 28th of February. You'll be notified by May 1st. Your work plan is due June 5th. And then in 2021, your final project would be due June 25th. When you're working on pulling together your application, make sure that you're really picking a topic that is relevant. Really utilize that list of topics that can be found on the ARDRAW website. You want to make sure you have a basic understanding of SSA programs and how they interact with each other. And then lastly, you really want to make sure that your research and your proposal is feasible. It is a one-year project, so you want to make sure that it can be completed within a year. If you are going to be doing a survey or you need participants in your study, you want to make sure you have access to those participants or have a solid plan for how to reach out to participants. Similarly, you want to make sure, and you'll need to have access to any data that you know is already out there that you'll need to move forward in your research. And in relation to that, you'll want to make sure that you've factored in time for your IRB to completely review your proposal. So we will now hear some tips and advice from a current ARDRAW student, Katie Savin. Katie's currently a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley School of Welfare, and she's in her second round of ARDRAW funding. We've been happy to have her as a wonderful addition to the program. Katie?
Hi, everyone. Great to be here and talking to you. Let's see. So I am in my second year of ARDRAW funding right now. My first application was for the 2018-2019 year, and it looked into kind of making ends meet, how SSI and SSDI beneficiaries work within and around labor-incentive programs. That was a qualitative interview study. And this year I'm working on another qualitative interview study looking at the extra costs of disability, in particular the extra costs of vision loss as related to people who do not have vision loss. Okay. So in terms of thinking about how to be strategic for your application, I definitely recommend to be very familiar with the state of the literature for your topic, what exists, what type of data, and maybe where you can identify gaps. For example, for this year, there's a lot of quantitative data about the extra costs of disability, but there is not a lot of qualitative data that sort of explains what it looks like. So that is one way of identifying a topic. I'd also recommend that you get to know the disability benefit application process and sort of the whole process of living on disability benefits. If you know anybody who lives on them and you can talk to them about it, that's a great option. And really looking at those together, you want to make sure you can understand how your research topic might be able to inform Social Security policy. So yeah, those after that, when you apply, you may receive some feedback from ARDRAW project managers or SSA policymakers. So definitely take that feedback into consideration for your grant as well as for your process over the year. And I would recommend before you find out whether or not you get your grant to try to apply for an IRB if you're collecting original data. IRBs can be notoriously difficult, and I don't want to sort of get stuck in waiting for them while your year passes. So also for that reason, I also recommend front-loading your work plan. So try to think about doing as much as you can in the first part of the year so that with any unexpected delays, you can always use your second semester to catch up. Okay, and then just overall tips. There are lots of great ways that you can use this opportunity to network. I've now presented on at 2 different conferences with 2 different fellow cohort members from the ARDRAW grant. It's often we don't have other people researching this topic in our program, so it's a really neat way to get to know other people who are doing the work and share ideas and challenges. Also being able to use the conference funding through ARDRAW to go to a conference and meet other people in the field is really, really helpful. And when you're in the program, there are lots of opportunities to talk to the program officials and people in ARDRAW. There's the quarterly reports and calls, so definitely keep them posted. There's always lots of people helpful with feedback and suggestions. So yeah, if you're struggling with anything, you don't have to do it on your own. And definitely consider applying for a second grant. Even if this is your first year, if you get in this year, know that in that next January, February, that the deadline will come up again. And there are a number of us in this cohort who now have the grant for 2 years. And then lastly, the final report is a great opportunity to look at publishing in an academic journal. The format is very similar to what you would use for most journals that you're asked to provide in the final report. So sort of think about potential conferences and journal outlets as you go. So that's all I have, and I'll stick around later for any questions.
Thank you so much, Katie. So I will go over some tips on behalf of another current student in the program, Jessica Murray. Jessica was unable to be here today, but she sent over some great tips and advice from her time in the program. She's a PhD candidate in developmental psychology at the Graduate Center at CUNY, and she is also in her second round of ARDRAW funding. So I will give you a little bit of background about the projects that the project she's currently working on and the project she previously worked on. Her previous project was titled Understanding Transportation Challenges for People with Disabilities Returning to Work. And she used a survey to really, measure the severity of transportation challenges in the context of other common barriers to employment. After that, she did a comparison of travel behaviors and barriers between people with and without disabilities, and then also between those who were receiving Social Security benefits and those who were not. So her current research actually builds on that previous project. She is expanding her survey based on the findings from her first study and doing a new project titled Self-Determination in Transportation, the Route to Social Inclusion for People with Disabilities. And this project is really guided by the self-determination theory, where she's using that revised survey to further develop measures of problems in transportation that really take away from someone's basic psychological needs, autonomy, relatedness, and competence. Some of the tips that Jessica sent over include to make sure that you're thinking outside the box. Are there problems for people with disabilities that are not addressed in the Red Book or that get very little attention? Are there policies that are outdated and could be improved upon? Also make sure that you're thinking about potential research through a policy lens. Will the answers to your research questions could they potentially lead to policy recommendations or policy changes? Make sure that you are researching the proposed topics that interest you, and then after that, really dig into, okay, what areas are lacking research, and then in addition to that, what areas are lacking data, and what are the existing data sets that are out there, and how might you be able to dig into that to answer your research questions or to add to those data sets. Really using it to justify the need for research on your topic. And then lastly, she suggested asking for feedback from your proposal on people who work in the arena, people who work for disability service organizations, and ask them for their advice and their input. Once you receive your award, Jessica said, you're going to want to collect your own data, but make sure that you have a list of contacts in advance who can help disseminate your survey or your recruiting materials. And you'll also want to make sure that you're thinking through any potential problems that you might run into while recruiting, and then have a way to adapt if things don't necessarily go according to plan. When you're doing your survey, you'll want to check the accessibility of any survey instruments and then offer alternative formats such as a large print copy available by request, or maybe allowing someone to take a survey over the phone. And when you're engaging these survey participants, a great thing to do is to maybe consider offering an incentive, something like a gift card, or Jessica actually suggested even a raffle prize to attract participants. Just make sure that you've kind of cleared everything with the IRB at your school. You'll want to develop a detailed timeline with a lot of wiggle room. Things won't always go as planned, so you want to make sure you have that room built in for setbacks and for any delays. Also, creating a budget. It's not a requirement, again, but make sure that you're keeping track of those expenses, which you can use to help yourself keep on track, but you can also use for tax purposes at the end of the year. And then lastly, like Katie said, really take advantage of those professional development opportunities through ARDRAW. Start thinking about appropriate conferences, start doing a little bit of research so that you can get the most out of the program. So our ARDRAW project officer, Laura King, will now provide an overview of SSA program areas. Laura?
Thank you, Erica. So we do a little overview of our SSA programs because we realize that people that would be interested in the grant program are sometimes on a wide spectrum. Some are very familiar with our program rules, and some are not as familiar with our program rules. So for those of you that are familiar with our disability programs and work incentives, I hope you can be patient with me. And for everyone else, this is just a very high-level overview to kind of get you started thinking about SSA's programs that we're hoping you might be interested in doing research that is related to them. So to start with, SSA has two different disability programs, which the general public is not very clear that it's two different programs. So the first is the Social Security Disability Insurance that provides benefits to people who are insured by their workers' contributions. This is the program that is funded through our trust fund, which when you pay FICA taxes on your earnings, this is the program you become eligible for. And then our other program is our Supplemental Security Income Program, which makes cash assistance payments to the aged, blind, and disabled who have limited income and assets. So it's a means-tested program, and instead of being based on the amount of work one has done in the past. So those are our two programs. Some people are in one or the other, and then we have people who are concurrently in both programs. So our definition of disability, each federal agency, depending on their mission, has a different definition of disability. Ours is set forth in the Social Security Act. So SSA's definition of disability, by which we judge eligibility, is the inability to engage in any substantial gainful activity because of a medically determinable impairment that is expected to result in death or has lasted or is expected to last for a period of 12 continuous months. So substantial gainful activity, as SSA defines it, is work activity either as an employee or a self-employed person, and it's used as a guideline to determine the amount that people are eligible for under the SSI program, and whether they have the ability to work. So there's a set monthly amount for SGA, and changes each year. And the current monthly amounts are here on the side. It's $1,260 for non-blind individuals and $2,110 for blind individuals. Oh, I'm having trouble with the slides.
Laura, would you like us to advance the slide? Yeah, we can advance the slide for you if that works.
Yes, I think I might have been disconnected from the webinar. So yes, if you would please advance the slide. So the next slide is about work incentives. So once people apply for benefits and are awarded benefits, SSA understands that, sometimes even though people get benefits, they may want to go back to work for various reasons. So we have rules to help beneficiaries keep their benefits, or at least some of their benefits, as they try to figure out if they're able to go back to work. So for our SSDI recipients, this provides opportunities for them to make money that exceeds SGA while still remaining on benefits, and then gradually transitioning off of them. For SSI recipients, it allows some of the income to be discounted so that their check does not decrease as fast. So the first category is work expenses. So if a beneficiary has expenses that are related to their impairment, like certain disability-related items and services, then that can be deducted from their earnings. So if they have to pay $150 each month for car service to get to their job, that can be deducted from the $1,000 they make. So they may be able to stay under SGA because of that exclusion. And then there are blind work expenses are a separate category from other impairment-related work expenses. So if we go to the next slide is about the trial work period. So with the trial work period, a person can try working for 9 calendar months, and that work will not be counted against the SGA limits. And they can be consecutive months or they can be spaced out months. Once a person has completed their trial work period, there's what's called the extended period of eligibility. And that means if a person has worked their 9 trial work period months, they're still on benefits, but once that's over, if they continue to make SGA during the extended period of eligibility, the benefits are simply suspended rather than terminated for the next 36 months. So that means if at any point in that 36 months, if earnings fall back below SGA, benefits can be reinstated without going back through the application process, which is a reasonably long process. So for beneficiaries who have completed their extended period of eligibility. That means they've returned to work and their benefits are terminated because they're back to work. We still have a couple of benefits. There's the continuation of Medicare coverage. So for at least 93 months after they transition back to work, they will continue to get Medicare. And for the first 93 months, Part A is premium free. And then after that 93 months, they pay a premium, but they're still eligible for Medicare. And then as well as the Medicare coverage, there's expedited reinstatement. So if they are back to work, they're doing good, but within 5 years, for whatever reason, their disability becomes so that they are no longer able to work within 5 years. They are given an expedited reinstatement, so that allows for the 6 months while they're waiting for their new application to go through. They're able to get 6 months of temporary cash benefits while they wait. So next, if we go to the next slide, it talks about income exclusions. So this applies for SSI beneficiaries where their income counts against their benefit. The earned income exclusion means that the first $65 plus half of the remaining monthly income is excluded from countable income. And then the student earned income exclusion means that students that are regularly attending school may earn up to a certain amount a month, and then that does not count against their benefit payments. And then our PASS, the Plan to Achieve Self-Support, lets beneficiaries set aside wages and other income in a specific fund to use to pursue a work goal like education or vocational training or technology for employment-related purposes. And that does not count when the SSA payment amount is calculated. So that's just a high-level overview of our programs and work incentives. There's a lot more information to be found on the SSA website, and specifically the Red Book. The link to the Red Book is on the next slide, and that is our entire policy handbook on work incentives. So that's been really quick, but I just wanted to do a quick overview, and I'll let Erica take back over.
Thank you, Laura. Just as a reminder to everyone who is on the webinar, we will have the slides and a recorded version of the webinar available on the ARDRAW website. But we now have some time for questions and answers. So you can either ask a question by typing it into that Q&A panel, or you can raise your hand on the side there. But Laura, as you were presenting, we had a question pop up that we think you might be able to answer here. Jonathan was wondering if he's already receiving funding from another federal source, getting money from an OSEP grant. Does that no longer make him eligible to apply?
So it depends on the policy set forth in his current agreement. OESP is I'm not sure what that acronym is for. If it's anything within SSA, if they are receiving any research funds from any other SSA program, then they would not be eligible. But if it's from a different federal source, it's all in the details. So if he wants to email with the specifics, we could definitely address his specific case.
Okay, great. Thank you. It looks like we had a similar question from Janet Horn. She said she is a PhD candidate funded by an NIH T32 grant and was wondering the same thing, if it makes her ineligible. I'm assuming the answer might be the same. Is that correct, Laura?
Yes. So if it's not SSA funding, it's not an automatic no, and it will just depend on the language within her current agreement with NIH. So, yes,
Perfect.
That's another let's talk.
Great. So Jonathan and Janet, feel free to email me at, reach out to me through the ARDRAW website or email me at my email, which will be on the last slide here. And then anyone else who has a similar question, please feel free to reach out. Looks like we have a question from Megan Donahue. If we already have the data set, how do we prove that we have access to the data? I believe that's something that you would be able to easily clear with your IRB, but Kristen and Laura, is there anything else you'd like to add?
So if it's a public use file, you can just simply say I'm planning on using this public use file. If it's data gathered yourself or within maybe your department at your university, a letter from whoever is in charge of the data set would be good. If you're planning on using a data set from a local organization, a letter from that organization. Kristen, am I missing possible other alternatives?
No, I think that sounds like a great kind of workaround to have a letter indicating, from whoever controls that data set. That makes sense. Or, just pointing to the public data set that you're using.
If we haven't answered your question, if you can give us more details in an email, we're more than happy to answer questions.
Perfect. Let's see. I know that we had a hand raise and then a question from Gulraise. Is the grant eligible for international students? You do need to be a U.S. citizen or a U.S. National. So I guess the term international student could be, there could be a few definitions, but it really does come down to that citizenship. And let's see. We have a question here from Abby Baker, and I think maybe Abby asked two questions, one about the number of applicants and how many are accepted. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but could provide them to you at a later date. And I don't think that there is a preference for qualitative or quantitative. I know that a lot of students in our current cohort are using a lot of qualitative data, but I don't think that there is a preference for either or. But Laura and Kristen, feel free to jump in if you prefer otherwise.
So we are very open to both quantitative and qualitative, just as long as the methods that are used for whichever one are sound and our experts think they seem like good and valid methods. We don't tend to have a preference.
Thank you, Laura. And Kristen just noted that there is opportunity for up to 25 students to receive the award in this round of cohort funding. We have a question from Rumi. Is it possible to discuss the research idea I have with someone to understand if it meets the scope or interest? I'm more than happy to discuss your ideas with you. Feel free to reach out via email or through the ARDRAW website. So we have a question from Megan Donahue. I'm thinking about RSA data that you have to apply for, but it is public. I think that we've had a couple of students in the past who have done a similar thing, and I think as long as you build in enough time to submit that application and to receive the data, that should be fine. But again, I'll open it up to Laura and Kristen for any further clarifications.
Yes. Before we will award, we're going to want to know that they have gotten the approval to get that sort of data. We're always happy. We have definitely had students that have used similar data sets where they're public but restricted. But yes, if you're thinking you want to use that, go ahead and get your application in now so that you can hopefully have an answer. If not when the application is due, then shortly after. So, and then when you submit the application, if you have not gotten a final answer, include that you've applied, and if you have been able to get anything from the body you're applying to about when you should hear back, include that in the application. Kristen?
Thank you, Laura. I have a follow-up question from Megan, which also might be a question for you, Laura. Are SGA amounts set at those $2 amounts, or are those amounts the caps?
Those are the amounts. That's what's considered SGA. So anyone who makes more than SGA, if it's lower, they're not making SGA. If they are making more, they are making SGA. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question. But it's simply a measure for us to decide if a person is able to work. Whether or not it's the best measure is perhaps a debate for another time, but that is the measure that is used, is someone making this amount of money. And then if they're making over that, they're considered working. If they're making under that, they're not considered working.
Thank you, Laura. We have another question from Abby Baker. Is there a preference given to PhD students versus master's students? And there is no preference as long as you're in an accredited program by fall 2020. Both are accepted. We have another question from Amy. I'm assuming the question is asking, can you use any data related to the VA or veterans benefits and programs? I would say certainly, as long as it's applicable to the topics that have been discussed and the topics that SSA is interested in learning a bit more about.
Yes. And if you are able to obtain that data.
That's a great point, Laura. We have a question from Tracy. If I'm considering my project from a small number of participants for the data pool, would that be a concern? I think it might depend how small.
Yes.
There is some flexibility there, but if you have Tracy, if you have a specific idea in mind, feel free to reach out and we can provide some additional clarification. Let's see. A question from Jonathan about how many applications we typically receive and how many are awarded. I don't have the number for applications again off the top of my head, but this year we will award 25 grants. I think that we've got all of the questions. If someone has asked a question and felt like we didn't address it or didn't address it properly, again, feel free to reach out and contact us. Just doing one last scan here to see if there are any questions that we missed, but I think we're all set. So thank you all for attending the webinar today. Again, if you do have any questions, you can reach me, Erica Smitka, by phone or by email. And you can find out more about the ARDRAW program and find the link to apply on our website. We look forward to reading your applications. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.